Welcome everyone. I'm excited to have you all here to discuss the state of the oil and gas EPC segment in the region. Obviously, it's been a challenging year all across the board, but we've seen some incredible resilience and some innovation in the face of these unprecedented obstacles. And we see some hope looking ahead into the next year. So I'm very excited to get to the discussion, but first I will introduce everyone. Going from left to right, first we have Ashley Williams, who is the editor of Construction Week. We have then Elie Lahoud, who is the COO-designate for Petrofac. And then Jamal Al Wahedi, who is the VP of Strategy and Business Development from NPCC. And Mr. Srivatsan, who is the EVP and Head of Offshore Business for MEA at Larsen Toubro Hydrocarbon Engineering. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm very excited to get into the discussion and to get your insight in this very interesting and challenging time for the industry.
Thank you, Carla.
So let's get started with the questions. I'm actually going to start with you, Ashley. If you could give us an overview of the regional EPC space right now.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And thank you, Carla, for the introduction and for the invite to be part of this discussion and to be joined by some really great names. So my take on this year, obviously it's been quite a remarkable year. And since the pandemic has arose, the EPC sector has had to adapt. And as I follow the construction industry more kind of than the oil and gas sector, what I found out is that a lot of managing directors and CEOs of big stakeholders within the industry have been quite reluctant to change how it operates, and they like to stick to what they know. Margins have obviously been squeezed, and nobody expected the ferocity of how the pandemic would impact sectors. But largely, the construction sector was actually nowhere near as affected as other industries. For example, the hospitality industry, construction still continued across the region on big projects in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and other countries within the region. But the EPC sector is showing early signs of recovery, particularly within the third quarter of this year due to the improved economic activity. So there does seem to be some optimism for the oil and gas EPC sector in particular, that it's getting back up on its feet. Especially ADNOC in particular, they've started to award a lot of EPC contracts to the likes of China Petroleum Pipeline Engineering Company and Target Engineering Construction, which shows that they're recovering and getting back up on its feet. I also noticed that ADNOC Distribution also released its 9-month and third quarter results this morning with a net profit of 1.6 billion for the first 9 months. That's 1.6 million dirhams. And for the third quarter, quite interestingly alone, net profit stood at 671 million dirhams, which obviously shows how much the market has accelerated and bounced back since the start of the year. I've also noticed quite a lot of attention and interest to the Bahrain market to promote the optimal use of natural resources such as water resources. There was an MOU signed between Bahrain's oil minister and the Bahrain's Works, Municipalities Affairs and Urban Planning minister in recent weeks, which I'm finding quite interesting. I'm quite looking forward to following the news on that. But I just think the main thing that the EPC sector needs to look at the moment is sustainable construction. It's quite a big talking point at the moment, and it's one that's going to be seriously considered, I think, once the pandemic is eventually over.
And I do want to come back to that point about sustainable construction a little later in the conversation, because I think it's very important, especially in the oil and gas sector. But to continue kind of the point on where we are right now in the EPC space, if we're looking specifically at oil and gas, I'd like to take this around the rest of the roundtable. Elie, if you could start us off with kind of your comments.
Yeah, sure, Carla. I mean, I wish I can share Ashley's views and positivity, but unfortunately, I don't. And the oil and gas part of the industry has not seen the recovery that he mentioned. We might have seen it in smaller contracts and construction, and in types of contracts that are maintenance, and that the operators will continue to launch and execute. But in the core EPC industry, we were already living before the pandemic with the lower for longer phase. So all the oil price drop, was leading to lower investments and lower projects. And then the pandemic hit, which hit again the consumption, and there was a price war just at the start of the pandemic between Saudi Arabia and Russia. So all those compounded the impact, and we have seen a significant cancellation of projects, movement to the right, as we call it, of investments. So even ADNOC now, with many tenders that were launched and we thought they will be awarded by this year end, are now easily shifting and comfortably shifting into 2021 and beyond. So the pandemic, if it has done something, it has, of course, impacted the investment, but also maybe the positive side of it, it has accelerated the transition into new energy forms, which I'm sure we can talk about. So there's a positive lining, and there's maybe a role for EPC contractors to play in that. But focusing on the core EPC, the impact has been hard felt. Even clients like Aramco, which have historically not being affected by worldwide events and continue to invest and spend, they've put on hold several key projects and postponed several others. So we are yet to see, in summary and in simple terms, we are yet to see signs of any major recovery. But if we look at longer term, there could be an opportunity here for EPC contractors to change game, to diversify, increase the energy offering, and not purely be focused on oil and gas. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in a while.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. Yeah, it's definitely, we've seen a very heavy impact across the oil and gas industry and in the EPC space. Jamal, do you have anything to add? Anything that you'd like to say about this?
I think I would probably agree with Elie. If anything, the pandemic has really caught us all off guard. I'm sure as EPC players in the oil and gas or in the energy sector at large, we've all looked at all scenarios. We've built in our planning, our strategies, all possible options. But I honestly don't think any one of us anticipated something like the coronavirus. So, and that was a game changer for everybody. And I think the industry and the service providers in the industry, like the panel representing the companies here, will be looking at the sector completely differently going forward. So it has been actually quite a negative impact on us, as Elie elaborated earlier. A lot of deferment. Operators, be it international oil companies or national oil companies, are rethinking their priorities. They are, again, like us, looking at things differently. A bit of uncertainties about 21 and possibly 22. So that has definitely impacted their appetite to roll out tenders. What we've seen is that most of what's coming out are ones that are unavoidable, irrespective of the circumstances, or the ones that are maintain potential, the bare minimum they need to do to sustain whatever production they have. Now, I believe it will be going on in this manner for a while, though we are seeing some of them started rolling out reasonably big sized tenders, but whether these would actually be awarded on the anticipated timeline is a different issue. I think maybe the operators are testing waters, trying to develop what sort of maybe budget would that entail in anticipation for a market recovery.
Srivatsan, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, Carla, I think very well said by Elie and Jamal on the problems that the industry faces. But our perspective has been slightly, I would say, different. This has been a pandemic of a fantastic proportion, which nobody anticipated. So I think the stakeholder reactions to these situations based on our backlog and the projects has been very positive in the sense that, you would expect people to give up. There is a high level of anxiety, which has been brought about by this pandemic. But we have had very healthy engagement with our clients, and we have had very healthy engagements with our own employees and others. We have been able to avoid any severances. We have been able to avoid any closure of projects in the meantime, which is, I think, very positive. Normally, I think the reactions would have been very negative. I mean, like what Elie said, there were two things which affected. One is the pandemic and the oil price. But the third very important thing that came up at the same time was the visual clarity that if you didn't come to work and if people did not run cars, there was a lot of greenness that comes back. The environmental improvements were visible to the entire public at large. So obviously there is a transitioning that's going to be happening from pure fossil fuels to probably a blend of fossil and others. And that's a positive that comes out, that we may need to build more. For example, in Abu Dhabi itself, we have got that Project Lightning, which is essentially to bring power from the shores to the offshore. And that's something we are very keenly pursuing. And these are the kind of prospects that we are looking up. Right now, our main focus has been to protect what we have and prevent any leakages and be innovative in this period. One of the best adaptation I must add here is for my company. From where we were, we thought everything will come to probably a standstill or a force majeure kind of a situation. But from, let's say, the middle of March until about the early April, we could bring back our entire business continuity back to about 98%, which means we could digitally connect instantly, like we are doing right now. And we could get our business going. We could build things and invoice things. Our yards came to almost full speed. They are not affected severely by the pandemic. Yes, they are affected, but we are managing it very well. The projects are, let's say, almost at about 80 to 90% operations. Client also understands. So the delay in the projects have been absorbed. So to a very large extent, I would say that there has been maturity in the market to accept what is there. Maybe we'll have to play it through. I hope the vaccine comes effective and people do give up the anxiety and fear of the future. And we all look at the EPC world in the future as a blend of what's new and what was old. And maybe we will look at a very different world in the next couple of years. 21 will be a learning year for all of us. So we look forward to that area. As long as we can make people feel safe, stakeholders survive well, we will look at the next couple of years more positively.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of brings me naturally to my next point, which is, we've discussed some of the challenges and, the impact that the pandemic has had on the EPC space. But what I would also like to know is, what were your strategies for dealing with this unprecedented challenge this year? What were the lessons learned? And again, if I could start with you, Elie.
Apologies, I was on mute. I mean, like Srivatsan said, of course, as all businesses have seen, we realized quickly that you don't need, everybody in an office in a location to be able to deliver. That's a common finding, and we also reacted very quickly. And I would say we didn't miss a beat. I was surprised by how capable we were at responding and bringing everybody back in a way or another, in a shape or another, to continue to deliver to our clients. And the clients definitely appreciated that. They worked with us, and we're still continuing to work because COVID is still with us. We thought when this happened that by July we will be over with it, but it continued to have an impact, and it has been felt differently in different countries. But again, there's a benefit, and now everybody's of course looking at how can we capitalize on that realization for the longer run. How can we have this digital connectivity and move with it and not lose the efficiency and the productivity that we were able garner as a result of this. And I mean, there was a joke about digital transformation, and businesses have been trying to accelerate digital transformation before, and the joke went on that who had the best impact, the CEO, the CFO, etc., or the last one was the pandemic. And it's a fact, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation for us, and digital transformation has a lot of potential in bringing in efficiencies and productivity. So digital transformation is there to stay, connectivity is there to stay, this new way of working as well, and this hybrid model, because in my opinion, it cannot be purely digital and remote. It has to be a combination. Sometimes you have collaboration that's required. So this is there to stay. This is a positive out of the pandemic, and I'm sure we will live with it. The other thing, which is I said it in answering the previous question, is the pandemic has accelerated also the energy transition. We've been talking about energy transition, and if you look at Petrofac, we've been delivering projects in the wind energy in Germany for clients like TenneT for several years now. So we were on that journey, but all of a sudden now it has become the desire of all the main operators. If you see about BP's net zero targets and so on, everybody's jumping on that bandwagon. And I think there's a realization that the best entities to deliver the renewables and the energy transition are actually the oil and gas operators, because they have the deep pockets, they have the funds, they have the ability to transform how this is looked at. And as EPC contractors, we're joint at the hip, let's say, to these major operators. So we could go along with them on that journey. And that's, again, that a realization of this. So we are accelerating more business into oil, into renewables, wind, solar. Srivatsan mentioned one project which straddles both oil and gas and sort of new energy, which is powering up the offshore assets of the regional clients from the shore, either through renewable measures or traditional measures. So there's a positivity on all of this. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and 21, as Srivatsan said, will be really a pivotal year in how we go along for the future.
Jamal, if I could get your comments.
Well, I think couldn't agree more really with Elie and Srivatsan on that. I mean, it has been a great wake-up call in the positive sense. I mean, it's we in NPCC, as I said, we seized the opportunity. I mean, as much as I said, there were disappointments in terms of volume of work that was maybe out there in the market. But it was really an opportunity to test how the company would perform under these adverse situations. And I'm really very proud to say that the jobs that we've had, and a few of them were offshore jobs, we were able actually, by thinking differently, by trying to come to terms with the restrictions around operating under a pandemic situation, we've actually not only been able to deliver on time, but we've been able to entertain even accelerated schedules from the clients. Like Saudi Aramco. So if that tells us anything, is that there is a lot within really the organization. It's just a matter of really identifying that and creating the space and the opportunity for it to surface. And the pandemic has been, in a way, very good at that. So we are rethinking our priorities, and we found out that we can really do a lot. Digitalization, as Elie mentioned, it is, while it was something embedded in the organization, everyone really believed in it, all of a sudden we were able to realize the true magnitude of deploying it. So then, as Elie again said, I keep referring to Elie because I liked the way he put it, is that the pandemic has become actually the driver of digitalization. And we are very confident that with the digitalization drive that we've been able to navigate safely through the past 11 months. We will be under the influence of pandemic restrictions, I think, at least for a few months, subject to how the vaccines would progress. But however, I think we've managed to work out ways around it, and we are almost running business as usual. A lot of obviously new ways of doing business remotely, something that maybe we never contemplated deploying it to that extent, but we've actually, and thanks to technology and established systems, we found that it is a possibility. And going forward, I think we as EPC contractors, there is a lot of benefit for us, I think, in trying to really adapt and embrace some of these ways of doing business going forward. So we are very confident, and we look at it with high expectations.
And Srivatsan, you preemptively answered this question, so I'm not going to take it to you. Actually, I just want to check if you have anything to add, kind of from a general broad strokes perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with Elie and Jamal there. I think there's been a huge push for the digital transformation. We're obviously seeing technologies such as artificial intelligence, automation, and building information modeling that is kind of being rapidly accelerated across the EPC sector. I think we need to embrace this change. We're all living in a time now where we use technology for pretty much everything. I think in terms of the lessons learned, I believe every business needs to now have a plan B or a contingency plan. As we kind of discussed already, nobody could have predicted a global pandemic this year, and I don't think anyone was prepared for the repercussions that it was going to have. I think businesses should always prepare for the worst case scenario. I think if you have no precautions in place, whether that's to protect your staff or your finances at the business, you're inevitably going to fall into trouble. And this has happened with quite a lot of firms, particularly within the construction sector. Obviously, we heard about Arab Tech Construction. Obviously, they're a massive contractor. I think no matter the stature of the company, if you don't have a handle on things, then you're gonna fall into trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as an added note, I mean, the companies that we have represented here, Petrofac, NPCC, and LTHE, are all in our top 30 EPC contractors, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason. I think that's part of the reason you were able to respond relatively quickly to the pandemic. And like everyone has noted, digital transformation, that's a big, that was a big factor. If you were ready for that switch to digital, you were prepared. Even if you didn't know, you were already preparing for the pandemic. So I'm going to take to, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just a single additional point I wanted to mention. You see, normally the organizations are running as business as usual. And this is a time when I think a lot of the transformation happened bottom up, because when the problem struck, people actually across the organizations that we deal with down the line, they said, listen, we can collaborate in a way that we don't need to come to work. And that's probably what made this change almost like it was waiting to happen, but there was no top-down drive. But it happened automatically because it was just waiting to happen, in my view. What I wanted to say is it was not a transformation, but it was just there for us to recognize. We were not willing to recognize the digital possibility. And that's what happened, because it cannot change in one day. It was just there for us to recognize as organizations that it was there.
Yeah, like that potential was there for you to just leverage it when you needed it. And
that's it. It was just an adaptation of that time. Of course, now there is the moment we have realized it, I hope I'm not preempting your next question, but now there is a lot of demand to move from just there to be digital, to be from 3D to go to 4D, 5D, 6D, and 7D, so that we can do a lot of augmented reality with a lot of artificial intelligence, everything coming into play. And now there is a demand for it. So that is the next change, which is we are seeing as a demand more from the company itself. It's not coming from the customer. It's coming from the, let's say, the operators by themselves, saying that this makes a lot of difference. Can I do this remotely? Can I do it digitally? So that's a very big positive in this period of time that has come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, I guess, sort of preempt my question, which, yeah, do you want to take over as the moderator? No, so I mean, I want to know, because we're talking about digital and kind of moving quickly to a blended model. But, you know, generally that comes with its benefits, but also challenges in itself. In deploying digital solutions relatively quickly, there are, you know, issues of not just, you know, buy-in from the employees, but also cyber threats. So I wanted to know if, you know, there were any challenges that you faced when moving towards this blended model, towards increased digital use, and yeah, how did you manage that? And once again, I'm starting with Elie, and we'll go around.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, Carla, in any adoption of a new technology, the challenge is always the resistance to change of people. And especially with a, let's say, aging workforce in oil and gas, also you would be concerned and worried how easy it will be for these technologies to be adopted and to be taken on board. And we went through that. We had to go through and to make sure that we addressed it head on. Because while the younger generation, this was second nature to them, you know, with mobiles and different platforms that they're on, and they can manage so many different platforms without it taking it all. For the older generation, myself included, you know, between WhatsApp and email, that's it, you can't manage anymore. Add to it Teams and Zoom, and you're done. But yeah, I mean, we did some steps to make sure that the, let's say, the personal aspects of adopting new technologies are addressed. And we were surprised by how easy it was. It wasn't as hard as we had anticipated, because now everybody, again, as I said, used to technologies, used to apps. It's a lot easier than maybe 10 years ago when we tried to introduce a new software or anything like that. And again, how user-friendly the application are, how tangible the value is. Because as well, there has been different initiatives in the past in digital sphere that turned out to not deliver the outcome, were you know, a burden to the organization. So we had learned a lot from the past. It was important to apply those lessons and make sure that this time around, when we are rolling something out, there is a socialization, let's say, with the teams in advance. The user acceptability or acceptance testing is done, and that there is follow through as well in support and so on. And looking back at the past, what we achieved the past year, you know, I believe we've done well, and I was surprised that it was easier than we had anticipated.
And I'll take this next to Srivatsan, actually, because you did mention kind of, you know, the technologies were already there. There was just, you know, you needed that push, that opportunity where, you know, you needed to leverage them. So I'm wondering, was it an easy switch from your end as well? And were there any cyber threats, anything that, you know, came up as an issue while you were implementing these digital technologies?
No, absolutely. In fact, in March, when we shifted from a large workforce in the office to work from home, two things were required to be done. One, we had to enable the homes to be able to connect. One is the bandwidth, and second was the machines. And of course, the third, which was the most important, was the security. So there are a few commercial activities which we could not actually shift home to a large population because we anticipated a digital threat to it. Therefore, we said some activities will still have to be done from the premises where they are in secured service. But predominant activities which don't deal with, let's say, payments, where the phishing opportunities are fewer, there we said we do not have to worry about it. And we found, I would probably wager a guess here, that less than 5 to 10% of our activities were of that nature which could not be transferred, for which people had to come. So when we could get waivers from the governmental agencies to say, these many people can definitely come to work. And that is the blending that started happening. The second is maybe there is a demand that is now being felt that from being server-based, we need to become cloud-based. And when you go to cloud-based, then do we have own clouds, or do we adapt to other people's clouds, and how do we get security there? That's a question that is being, let's say, debated in my IT group or the digital group. And we are quite concerned about it. Yes, I don't think we have a full answer to it, but it will be possible if we are able to make payments for our personal things through this system, which are with cloud-based technologies, it should be possible for businesses to do that. Only you have to find comfort to accept it. We shouldn't wait for a pandemic to accept it. We should probably accept it earlier than that. It will happen. And we need to be future ready. And the future ready would mean that anytime such a situation happens, we need to be enabled for working from anywhere. I mean, that is something which is definitely the learning that we have got, that people should be enabled to work from anywhere. And whichever the gadgets they are using, which are the systems they're using, how well are we protected from, let's say, the crimes that can go on, which we should prevent, and the security of the people who use, and your own trust with your own people, how you can improve it. That would be important, and that will be developed, I think, very quickly, very quickly.
And
the fact is, your question is valid.
Yeah.
Are there threats? Yes, there are. How well do you manage it, and how well do you secure it? That will depend upon how the whole world will develop on the 5G and on the broadbands of that nature, which is going to be able to manage data, secure through these systems. Yeah.
And Jamal, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously cyber threat is something that's taken very seriously, and we have built-in measures to protect the organization from that. Now, as far as the relationship and the connectivity with our clients, that entailed a little bit of dialogue because of the different cyber security protocols that are deployed in the organization. So we had, when the pandemic started, there was a lot of effort in ensuring the connectivity of our workforce, that the majority were basically ended up working from home. We only had the bare minimum required at site, which is basically in the yard. The rest, almost everybody operated from home, and we, like our colleagues here in their organizations, we had to very quickly ensure that the connectivity is available and the readiness for where these guys are working and having the right security measures all the way to the headquarters. But I think we were able to do that right. A lot of interaction. Now, going forward, this is going to be a more pressing issue, because with the digitalization, with the deployment of the mobility around the plant, around the yards, and the expectations on the client side, that would bring another dimension of the cybersecurity. While technology makes it possible to expand in deploying technology with 5G, and yesterday I was reading about a 6G coming. So really the sky is the limit now, if it is true. Obviously 6G, it was just about a Chinese satellite, I think, being launched. But the whole thing is now is that with that, the expectations on the client community will be raised a higher bar. So we need to adapt to that. We need to make the best, but undoubtedly the potential is very huge there, very huge. And with a bit of controls on cybersecurity, a bit of government on the various protocols that are being used by the organization, I think we should be able to do that right now.
Carla, if I may just add 2 points around the same topic. I mean, I mentioned the human element, but what I missed to mention is that the connectivity for a global business is not the same in every country. I'll give you an example of one challenge we faced. We have several value engineering centers in India, and India went into lockdown immediately. So people had to go home. What we had to do is to actually transfer their desktop PCs to their houses, because a lot of them do 3D modeling, and they have special machines to do that. But what we've realized is many of these staff actually share their homes and live in small homes with their family and extended family, and the space for them to do the work. I mean, for us here sitting in UAE, connectivity is great, the network is great, and you can get your own space. But these people, as much as they wanted to continue to be connected and they wanted to deliver, the physical aspects of their surroundings did not help them. And one guy actually put his PC in a car and drove off to a place that he can connect to a Wi-Fi to continue to do work, because the Wi-Fi at his home was not strong enough. So there's that human element, that physical element that also has to be considered when we think we can roll out, worldwide. It might not be in the same level. The second one, which Jamal reminded me of, is our clients as well and how receptive they are to digital technologies. In the past, we used to be pushed back by the clients, not willing to accept, for example, remote inspections at factories or commissioning of compressor packages at site without the physical presence of a vendor rep. And what this pandemic has helped is, we had to do it remotely, and the clients all of a sudden accepted this. And we hope that we can carry forward with this, which will save money. It will lead to more efficiencies, less travel, all of this. So again, the client's receptiveness to this, I would say, has changed.
And that's a good point that you bring up. The nature of the EPC sector is very much collaborative, and it's very much hinging on the relationship with operators. And as the priorities for operators shift, EPCs do have to keep in step with the changes. So I'm going to bring this back to something that we've mentioned several times, and now we can properly discuss. We're talking about the energy transition. We're talking about sustainability. It's an increasingly important point for national oil companies and IOCs as well. So how do EPCs fit into the energy transition, and the increasing focus on sustainability and lower carbon emissions? Let's start actually, Ashley, if you have anything from kind of a broader perspective before we get into the specific, topics from the actual EPCs.
Yeah, sure. So I think I think the main theme here is collaboration. That's what I've noticed kind of over the past 6 to 8 months. That's where as well as technology, I think that's where the opportunities lie for the EPC sector. I believe that there's big scope for oil and gas firms to enter into different markets where they wouldn't necessarily thought about exploring previously. For example, we've obviously seen the ties between Israel and Palestine with the rest of the Middle East countries. That is going to be quite interesting to follow. I think that's going to open up trade and business opportunities in the future. We're also seeing big firms like Aramco making progress on multiple fronts with big markets such as Japan. I've read recently that they're in talks to include the world's first blue ammonia shipment for zero carbon power generation in the Asian country, which I think is really important. I also think sustainability, at the end of the day, we need to build for a sustainable future and to protect our built environment. I think it's important to identify the key principles that you want to achieve from the design, and equally important to keep the targets for sustainability streamlined. I think technology intertwines with sustainability. We've obviously talked about things like artificial intelligence. I think other technology concepts such as virtual reality and 3D modeling make these processes faster. And make things more flexible. That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I mean, to link that back to what Srivatsan, what you said, it's about being future ready, right? And that doesn't just apply to digital technologies, like you're saying, that applies to sustainability as well, and how do they play together? So that's an interesting point. So now looking at it from within an EPC company, within an engineering company, so how do EPCs fit into the energy transition? How can they empower that energy transition? What's their role and responsibility? Elie, if we can start with you again.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just before touching on energy transition, a quick one. When we mention sustainability to me is beyond the environment and energy transition. Sustainability for us and operating in this part of the world has always been about being part of the social weave of society, about hiring locally, about the in-country value that has been talked about and ADNOC and other countries. So the more we do things locally, the more we buy locally, fabricate locally, construct locally, the more these businesses will be sustainable. it goes beyond just energy transition, in my opinion. Now, going back to the energy transition, I think, as I mentioned, the EPC contractors have a major role to play in the transition, and they will definitely empower. They can empower, just like the operators will empower this. If it is, and we have the capability, we have the technical knowledge. Yes, it's a slightly different kind of product or plant at the end of the day, but you have the engineers, you have the procurement processes, you have the construction capability. We just have to realize that some of it is slightly different for us to be competitive. And we've looked, for example, at PV, photovoltaic solar for power production in the past. And we found that we can't be competitive because it's a commodity-based kind of construction. You have the solar panel, which is manufactured somewhere else, and you don't need a lot more expertise. So our ability to compete in certain parts of the energy transition may not be possible. But if we focus on where the value is, like we could provide steam or generate steam using renewable methods, wind energy is a big area. And you look at Oman, for example, there's a huge potential for wind, solar for the region as well. So the perception that renewables are not for this part of the world is definitely incorrect. This is happening. It's going to be accelerated, and all governments are realizing very fast that they need to do it. There's a big waste problem as well in the Middle East and in the GCC countries, and waste to energy is a big area that can be tapped into. So I believe the earlier we realize as the EPC contractors that we're part of the solution and we start taking those steps in that direction, the more sustainable our future will be, and the more we can contribute to the change.
Jamal, if I could take the question to you now.
I think we in the EPC business would probably very humbly say that we make it happen, really. The energy transition, you really need the community in the EPC business to translate all the aspirations and the strategies that the operators or even at the government levels they have. It's that embedded know-how, knowledge, experience that is within the EPC sector that can accelerate the realization process of the energy transitioning. Because we can always come up with alternative solutions. We have the motivation to start with to do that. And that is a very important element of a drive like this. So, a lot of technologies around, low carbon, basically around decarbonization. So I think almost or most of the EPC players in the region and globally at large have invested and they have drives towards decarbonization and developing technology and also adaptation of the prevailing technologies to serve that purpose. And we in NPCC, we've realizing, as I said, the level of expertise required in moving in these directions. Initially, we focused on renewables, on wind, offshore wind, as an area that we are focusing on, and we've started making certain steps in that direction. We are not there yet. However, we are building knowledge, we are building expertise, and we are also building relationships with potential clients in this regard. And I think it looks very positive going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you brought up offshore wind. In a recent conversation I had with McDermott's head for sustainability, one of the key points that he mentioned that EPCs bring to the table is knowledge, the capacity to work on these gigantic projects that are in remote locations that might be, other companies might not have the know-how. So oil and gas EPCs can seriously contribute towards projects in a way that other companies simply they don't have the knowledge. So I find that very interesting, and it's good to see that that's happening, even here with a UAE-based company. And Srivatsan, if I can get your comments now on the energy transition.
Absolutely. What you said is probably the primary point in my thought process, because as EPC contractors, we are mainly integrators of ideas. Clients want to build something, and like Jamal said, we are here to do it. We build things that are required for the community. And this transition would require very large infrastructure to be developed. And it is both innovative, creative, and at the same time, it has to be absolutely. Today, I can see the whole society is going towards a new consciousness of reduced consumption. So if you have to be frugally developing an energy environment which is available all the time, for instance, when we had those light bulbs, we used to consume 100 watts to get a little bit of light. Then we went to the CFL, which gave you with 20 watts the same lumens. And now with LED, with 4 watts, you get the same lumens almost. What I mean is the ratios have changed and the developments have been very good in this transition from the incandescent to the LED. In the same way, we will transition from where we are in oil and gas to probably hydrogen, probably methanol from carbon sequestration, probably wind, yes, but wind has the need to have storage because when you produce the wind energy, it has to be either consumed or it goes waste. So I think there are huge amount of changes that are going to come up in the production to storage to transmission to distribute. Batteries are going to be required. Today, the largest batteries, I believe, are in the 65, 60 megawatt range. The largest wind power turbines are in the region of 10 megawatts to 14 megawatts. And the largest transmission lines could be in the 400 kV DC AC kind of a size. And I think these will go on increasing. And maybe I don't fathom it's difficult to imagine a day when you will have the entire shipping community working on EVs because the batteries could be large and the ships can have parking stations in the middle of the sea because in the middle of the sea, you have everything that can be sustainable. You have wind, you have solar, you have water, which is hydrogen and oxygen, so you can produce hydrogen from there. Because hydrogen sustainably to be used for transmission needs to be converted. It can't be liquefied that easily. So when you produce hydrogen, how do you use it? Either you fill it into the gas station immediately, or you have to convert it into ammonia, or any other means by which it can be transported. So there are a huge amount of challenges which only a good EPC integrator can think through and develop. So I do expect that both oil companies and let's say the EPC companies have a lot to do together. This region, for example, like Elie said, has got a lot of wind and other energy forms. But fundamentally, the oil and gas itself can be converted into hydrogen, for example, and distributed in a manner that can be more efficiently used. So maybe it is not green, but at least it is blue. It is not black or brown. So to that extent, this region has a huge potential for hydrogen to be developed. And who else can do it for these companies than us? Because we have the ability to understand, to fashion that technology into what is deliverable, to build, to even build the prototypes, to check, verify, and make it happen. So I think it's a very, 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 let's say, we are in the cusp of a very major transformation. And these transitions are going to help us. And then probably our next generation of young engineers can be, let's say, excited to come back. Elie in the beginning said that we have an aging workforce because this entire area of business is seen as a dinosaur. But I think we are on the cusp of making it look attractive to the youngest in the world. And they could make this change happen to be A, conscious, 2, consumption, frugal, and efficient for the longer term. So I think it's a very interesting time for all of us. Yep.
Yeah. Carla, just one point, I think from what I've heard, I think you're hearing that if we don't jump on the bandwagon, we'll be left behind. It's not a choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not a what do you call a treadmill running at 6 to 7 kilometers an hour. This is a treadmill running at about 20 kilometers an hour, and everybody is trying to jump onto it with whatever they can, and they have to stay on. And you got to run at 20 kilometers per hour, learning what you don't know and delivering. I doubt if there is anybody other than the EPC contractors who can integrate this learning at that speed. You got to hit the ground running, and that's not going to be easy. So it's exciting, it's new, it's good, it's very, very challenging for the young minds, I feel.
I think if I may just add that if you look at a global level, you would see now that who drives the shift, energy transition is now actually the international oil companies. I mean, it's no longer those independent investors who are delving into the energy sector, trying to build infrastructure and make money out of it. It's actually now becoming the international oil companies. And that's an interesting shift. And I think soon we will also be witnessing such a shift in this part of the world. So I think being prepared is very critical, and it's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's a survival, because that is going to be the industry going forward. And I think EPC contractors in this sector are, I think, well positioned. There are a bit of tweaks that needs to come into it because of the specifics of the renewables, but we have what it takes, I think, to take it further. And we certainly have the manpower, we have the people, we have the talent, we have the motivation. And I think the latest pandemic situation proved to us all the value, obviously, of the most important asset, which is people, but also that they've actually, our people, our client communities have all really performed well beyond what we expected. And we really, they take a lot of credit to where we are now, and it's the credit that they own.
Yeah, and that's the exact point, right? It's get on the bandwagon, either adapt or you're no longer relevant. That's absolutely correct. And it's interesting because in this industry specifically, which has seen quite some turbulence in the past few years, let alone just this past year, that's when we see the most transformation, the most innovation, and it's a matter of survival, as you've all been saying. So no, that's a fascinating point. But I am conscious of time, so I will ask one last question before we wrap this up. So everyone's looking ahead, wondering when this is going to end. What is the recovery going to look like? There is no final timeline. There is a vaccine being developed, so people are looking a bit more optimistic. But what are the main challenges ahead? Looking towards a market recovery, what are the obstacles and what do we need to overcome to kind of move into a space where things are a little bit more normal in the EPC oil and gas space? And if I could start with you again, Elie, what's your take?
Sure. I mean, I'll leave it maybe partly to Jamal and Srivatsan to address as EPC contractors, but I wanted to highlight a point which I was reminded of when Ashley mentioned Arab Tech, and when you said that we're in the top, oil and gas listing. It's been easy for us to adapt, and we've managed to overcome the challenge. But where we are seeing challenges is with the contractors lower down, the tier 2 and 3 contractors. And I think our clients, the operators, they're not really realizing the potential impact that some of their behaviors are causing. COVID has caused a major cost. For somebody like us as an EPC contractor, we have 200 people on site. If you're there for 5-6 months, maybe you can manage the cost. But when you have subcontractors that have 10,000 and 15,000 people, and you keep telling them this is force majeure and you're not entitled and each party for its own and so on, these contractors are going to start falling by the dozen. And then the operators are going to realize there's nobody there to deliver their business. So I'm hoping that any of our clients will see this message and realize that they cannot continue with this approach. Somebody has to cough up the money for the industry to survive. And the fate of these subcontractors is in their hands. COVID has had a major cost, and those costs are genuine and will have to be covered. I mean, before I start thinking of the future, I think today this is my biggest concern for the industry and for my ability as an EPC contractor to deliver the projects we have in hand. If these contractors start failing, then the projects will fail and the clients will be hit.
Yeah, that's definitely an important point. Jamal, I'd like to hear your thoughts, both on the initial question and also on Elie's comments, if you have anything to add.
I think Elie emphasized the points very well. I think, as I said, it's completely new experience for everybody. And systems, policies, contractual terms were not built to maybe handle or manage a situation like this. It has adversely affected us as EPC contractors. And obviously going forward, the expectations is that on the client community, they will be attentive to this fact, and it just won't be possible to pass on this exposure to the EPC contractors. There has obviously to be a bit of controls and limits. And we expect that with the dialogue that we are having now with our clients, be it in GCC or for our clients outside the GCC as well, I think that will happen. We only hope that this happens fast enough to mitigate the exposure that EPC contractors are put under. Now, going forward, I think if that was the second part of the question, I think we look at it with a lot of optimism. However, we are not actually sitting and waiting. We've decided to take a bit of control in our hands as much as possible. And this is why, as I said, we are looking into new growth opportunities, new markets, new segments, new sectors that we think with the experience that we have, we can potentially penetrate those areas. A rebound on the oil and gas is going to be probably delayed. My personal opinion is that I don't think we should expect a rebound in the first half of 2021. If any, it will be in the second half, if not later than that. However, as I said, we are here and we are committed to our clients. We are committed to the communities that we serve, and we are, as I said, moving on. And hopefully, as I said, between all these initiatives that we are having, we will be able to navigate safely and maintain our
Carla, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Jamal, you cut out for me there, just that last sentence. Sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Well, I said that we are trying to be prepared as much as possible. And this is why I said we are really pushing the envelope into new geographies and new sectors, those that are obviously logically addressable by us, because also spreading your wings too much is extremely dangerous in the business that we are in. So it's really a delicate balance between those issues. But as I said, we remain optimistic about it. And a good part of it is actually lay in our hand and how we adapt to the situations and how we become more optimized in what we do and become more innovative in our solutions to our clients. And that's what would differentiate really the various EPC players in the market.
And Srivatsan, your comments?
Sure, and here, Carla, I'll say it's a lot to do with the future, and therefore it will be let's say, a leadership perspective. It may not represent the company's perspectives all the time. I do think that a few things that have come out of the discussion where Elie and Jamal have said things which is very relevant is that we all appreciate the problem, stakeholders appreciate, but nobody wants to take the pain alone. So if I break this into 3 phases, the initial phase where there were lockdowns or stoppage of work or disruptions, that is a cost that we have all borne. Now we have to allocate who will actually bear it fully, or is it getting distributed in some way that the pain can be either not fully forgotten, but at least accepted. The second phase is when we started doing the business continuity to make things happen, which is probably where we are right now. In this phase, with my team, what I've told them is, listen, this is a given that we have a pandemic, we have a virus of which we do not know how it's going to move. We are not doctors, so even doctors don't know. So let's not second guess what's going to happen. Let's assume this is a reality. Given this reality, how do we survive in a manner over this period of time until a vaccine or some other thing comes up to remain safe and still deliver business to our customers? But most importantly, third, the world will look at this period as transformative, and that change will impact all our lives. Isn't there a fantastic opportunity to be leading that change? And if you look at the future, I think the chances of surviving the past and the pains of the past are easier. But if I stay in the past to fight my returns from my existing customers, who themselves are also facing the pain, I may be not so successful in getting the money. Though I think we have to discuss it, I feel that the customers have to understand it, they have to appreciate it, and they have to factor that into the contracts very strongly. Even in the upcoming contracts, they don't want to add pandemics into it, which is not good. The clients must understand that when there is a pain, we must put it into the contract to know how do we handle it. You can say, I don't want to pay for it. So if there is a pandemic which goes for more than 3 months, we can agree to cancel the contract and pay for what you've done. But the consequence of such a situation must be contemplated between the client and contractor from a commercial angle, so that we are not left holding a baby as if it is it doesn't have a parent. So we need to have this baby to be decided between the client and contractors in a formal way to know how do we treat this problem. But at the same time, not doing things in the future, because one thing I do want to mention here is the future is not going to give very clear answers, because some clients will accept the risk, some won't. Some contractors will accept the risk, some won't. If another event hits, maybe those clients who accept will go down in history as people who did not do the right things. And if it doesn't hit, maybe they'll go back in history as somebody who did the smart thing of moving in that direction. But things will change, that's for sure, right? So it's far easier to move. And in fact, one of the ideas that I've given even internally is, why don't you go from being let's say a service provider to be, if it is possible, in a due course of time, to change and become a company which delivers the product as a service. So if I'm able to predict in this meeting that the client should be doing this, and the client is not doing that, then can I say that I become the client for the moment I become the developer for the concept and give the product to the consumer, and the consumer buys my product? Then my idea is good. And the moment my idea is good, my client will say it's a good idea. I don't mind selling my product to my client and becoming the next developer. Just like, long back when we used to have the air separation plants, they used to make oxygen and nitrogen, and they used to sell plants. I'm now talking about the 90s. But very soon they realized the people were not buying oxygen plants anymore so often. Then they innovated. They started making oxygen plants and selling oxygen, which people bought. So I'm finding that, there is a need to change the methods that we deal with our business. And maybe if you don't buy oil and gas, I will sell you hydrogen. If you don't buy hydrogen, I'll sell you methane. If you don't buy methanol, I'll sell you whatever I can. And if that concept works in the head, that I convert and deliver the product. And maybe that's a good way for us to survive. These are all, new ideas that come in the head to say, how do we survive? And I think there will be a lot of changes that will happen in the world. Those in the money will probably do something about it. Those in the knowledge will probably beat those in the money. Right now, what Jamal said is oil companies are leading because they still have some cash reserves, which they want to use to transition. But what will help you transition better is those who will be able to use their creativity to change the business model to what works. That's my view. And I think we are in that cusp where we need to probably harness that and grow onto that.
Carla, if I may just, I realize I didn't answer the question, and just say a few words picking up from where Srivatsan had said, at the expense of sounding like a cliche, everybody is talking about the new normal, right, as an expression. And to answer your question, I think you started with, we need to behave as this is the new normal. If we continue to live in denial that, we're going to get back to where we were, or to hold our breath waiting for that, we're going to sink. So really, from my side, is accept it as this is what we're living in. This is how it's going to continue. It's not going to get any different. and move and adapt for that. And that if we do that, we'll have a far better chance of survival.
Yeah, that is, like you say, that is the phrase of the moment. It is the new normal, and how do we adapt to that? That's also, it's a good point. I think finally, I'll just see, Ashley, if you have anything to add in terms of kind of the roadmap towards a recovery in the EPC segment, anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet because I know obviously time is precious in the moment. But yeah, I think nobody can predict what the future holds. I think Elie makes a really good example earlier where he said, people need to adapt or they will sink. It's simple as that. I believe that 2021 it will be better. I feel that we are more equipped to deal with the challenges and obstacles that are thrown at us. But I think the two things that I think where the opportunities lie is what we've discussed. Technology is going to be huge, I think, and I think collaboration is also going to be critical. When we look at cost implications as well, we're also seeing a big rise in the likes of public-private partnerships, which I think will get projects over the line. Things can change very quickly. Trends can change really quickly this year. And I'm quite excited to see what 2021 brings to us. I think there's a lot of markets that we need to look out for, especially within the oil and gas space. There was a bit of research that came out of Global Data. I think it was yesterday that Kuwait is leading the refinery capacity growth in the Middle East through one of its planned projects, which is called Al Zour, which is one of the biggest upcoming refineries in the world. So I think there's a lot of dark horses within the Middle East that we need to look out for, and I think that they could contribute to the growth and the recovery for next year.
Yeah, and so I would love to keep everyone here for 2 to 3 more hours to just talk about everything EPC related because there's a lot to cover, but unfortunately we are out of time. So I'll just end this by saying thank you to everyone for joining this roundtable. I feel like we've gotten some really great insights into the current state of the industry and potential growth areas as well as challenges. So thank you everyone for participating. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your time and thank you for joining us.